I cannot confirm it shared. I mean,
Is it on another screen? Is the
okay,
confirm?
share. That's
There it is.
okay.
Oh no. Now you see the matrix.
Okay, so
There we go. That's good.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Good, good. And that's, want to make sure that works for later. Okay, but I'll mute myself back for now.
And Daniel, you may want to click on the kind of first line stack on the top left and the left on the drip working group IETF.
here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And on the right on the plus, there is a rectangle with 2 arrows. Click on it as well.
Here it is.
Perfect. Thank you.
Beautiful. All right.
And
I will
the
mute
good thing
myself.
is that page down, well, does not really work.
Try now. Try the page.
Yeah.
There you go.
That's better.
All right. We got it. All right. I'll mute myself, and I think it's 11:01. So.
So maybe we can start. Med, do you think we can start, or should we wait a few minutes?
Please start on time.
Okay. So welcome everyone. So this is the IETF 110 derib session. Please take the time to read the note wells. And if you have any question, feel free to raise your question. I'm gonna go through the slides, and Med is gonna handle the queue. I can hardly see the chats, but I will leave Med to do that. So logistics. We need a mini taker. So it's a Stu. The minute you can help him by clicking on the link here. I'm gonna put the link into the chat so everyone can see that, and you can help him. Would be pretty appreciated. You don't have to sign the blue sheet. It's gonna be automatically done. You know, I guess, how to use the different tools we have. You should maybe not need to share your screen, but if you're talking, you can put the video on and the mic on. It's better. You can put yourself in the queue by raising your hand. If we need any hum, we have a tool here. I don't know if you see my mouse, but that's if we are asking a question to the working group, this is basically what we're going to use. So the agenda, I think, is there any comment regarding the agenda? Otherwise, we should go through the different drafts and see. We have basically 4 presentations. So it's an ongoing draft, implementations, updates, and new coming drafts. Currently we have 2 working group documents that are in working group last call. We have 2 documents that are working group documents that are making progress. The working group last call received many comments. one question I would have is I propose, how are we going to use GitHub? I don't want to open the debate on whether how good is GitHub and so on. So I propose that instead of just having a huge PR as I did, we should rather have a list of open issues. We could put them into the GitHub tracker, but the discussion should happen on the mailing list. So, which means that every issues that's going to be raised in the tracker will be open and discussed on the mailing list. So what I propose to is that I'm going to add issue regarding my comments, and I will let the co-author to open the discussion on the mailing list. Is that fine for everyone? Or anyone has a better way to proceed? The other question I had is regarding interim meetings. So how do we, I'm wondering if people would like to introduce more interim meetings, or if that's a reason, if the interim meetings are helping to make progress on the draft. That's something I would be happy to know. If those interim meetings are needed, we can set some. From last IETF, I don't remember we had any interim meetings, and we should try. We should try to see if that makes a difference. And last thing, I had a discussion with the RFC editors, and one of the things they told me that would help them is to use XMLv3. So if we have, when you're submitting your draft, you could basically try to submit the v3 version instead of XMLv2. If you look at the Codim, I have put some instructions on how to do that. I can share those on the mailing list. Basically, you could use the command line that is provided by Kasten, or there are also online tools. But just keep in mind that it may be something to keep. Any comment, any question, any things before we move to the next presentation? Yeah, Shuai?
Hey, Daniel. Yeah, just this is regarding the recent comment you posted on the GitHub. So the general comment is someone use GitHub very frequently, and I do feel like putting comment inside of the document, it's pretty hard to follow.
Okay.
I would rather we create a pull issues, right? Open an issue for each of them. That way we can track all your comments and put a comment under that. That'd be much easier. Instead of just click on the pull request inside of the issues, that would be hard to follow. It doesn't make sense to you. So.
Okay, so the comments I'm gonna the comments I made, I'm gonna put them into the Git tracker.
For the current comment you have already, you just leave it there. I will organize, right? For now, you don't have to spend the time to do that again because I gone through a couple of times already. I will definitely initiate the discussion in the mailing list. So that's fine. But for the following up comments, I would rather you put a pull request. Then basically mean this is one of the open issues. Then either a small one is fine, right? So we can address each of them. Then you know how many issues we have been addressed. Things are missing.
Okay. When you say pull request, because in most cases I'm not trying to change the text, so it's an issue. I open an issue.
Yeah. If it's just edit the text, you can do a pull request. So another one is really just to If it's just an open issue, just open an issue, then we can just address from there.
Okay, nice feedback. I will proceed as you suggest. Okay, and
we have
go, Matt.
Bob on the line. Please, Bob.
Yeah, I pretty much have moved us to version 3 of XML to RFC. I think we're good on that on current drafts. Just to let you know about that. I made that transition pretty much once Hendrik said that version 3 was ready to go.
Okay, good. So just to make sure, I'm understanding Shuai is going to handle the comments I provided into the tracker, and you're going to open the issues and bring the discussion to the mailing list. So I don't need to do anything on that side. Is that correct?
Daniel, that's affirmative. Yes. For now, for the current comments you have, I will definitely do that.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. So next presentation, Andre, or he's at students presenting. It's not Stu, it's students.
Actually, in the agenda, we will start with the, I would say, with the architecture, but if it's HUI, that will be next on the floor.
Okay. I'm going back. So, architecture. Okay, Shuai, go ahead.
All right, I'm just turning my videos on. It's early morning. Good morning, everyone. Okay. Hope you guys can hear me, right?
Yeah,
so
we can hear you.
As you already know, okay, thank you. So everybody know the architecture now is in Working Group Velasco. So here's just provide a updated summary thanks on IETF 109, since we don't have an intermediate between. And also bring up some of the important comments from last revision. That's just key for us to move forward. I do have a slide in the end to discuss how should we move forward. Next slide, please. So here's a quick summary. We have done 6 revisions since 109. Thanks to all the reviewers, Daniel and Eric and Matt, just all provided good, awesome comments. And the Working Group last call is on revision 11. So far, we have received comments from Daniel in the GitHub and Stefan from mailing list and Eric. Then we're gonna discuss some of the key comments that we needed to address in this meeting at the end. And next slide, please. Next slide, okay. So here's not the entire list that we have done so far. So I'll do a summary sent for each revisions in the mailing list. So if you are interested what a change in each revision, you can definitely look through the mailing list. But some of the major updates that needed to be emphasized here. The first one, we address all the edited notes, which is great progress. And Bob did a thorough review and proposed text for the FA final rule, which is great. And also one of the major things that we have agreed to is to reorganize the previous text. I believe that's since revision 5. And we try to consolidate all the HHIT related text to section 4 and 5. And also section 6 introduced the cross-source rate, which is trying to bridge broadcast ID to network ID. Then Stu suggests we need to align with the requirement with the terminologies, like things like replace US ID with the DRIP entity identifier, which is I think is really reasonable. I mean the principle here and the reason for the change is because we understand the US read stands for remote identification. It's really not a identifier. But in DRIP, we actually working on define a US identifier. So I think the change is aligned with the requirement. Is good suggestion. Another decision we recently made since revision 10 is to remove the original section 7, DRIP transaction trustworthiness. Since we all believe that's actually belong to a solution space. In terms of where it goes, I think the co-author will decide later. And the last point I want to mention, since the architecture draft, we all agree that it's informational nature, and also per AD's recent comment, we replace all the normative wording, specifically in section 456. I think that's kind of like quick fix. Not sure this is actually 100% right thing to do in the IETF. So do provide your comment on that. Next slide, please. So here's the things, one of the topics really to get some decision in these meetings, right? We want to get the working group consensus, which is regarding in what level of specification details, right, Drip architecture should include, right? That means more specifically, we should ask the working group, is this the right thing to include enough specification details to justify the proposed solutions? The discussion is really around the new sections we organized, right, 4, 5, 6. But just to recap, right, for what other sections are, right? Section 4 is really just the usage of HHIT as a trustable drip identifier, and which is also including some of the HIT background information and some level of the details regarding how HIT can satisfy drip requirement. The section 5 talking about the drip registration to the issues. Then section 6 introduced the cross-source ID, which is trying to bridge broadcast ID to network ID. Now, the comment received so far regarding that these issues are actually not very consistent. So now I copy-pasted a few of them, I think 3 of the comments from Daniel, Eric, and Stefan in the slide. Hopefully I'm not getting it out of context, but the key is trying to let us look through the comments, see if this is really acceptable to including some level of the details to like justify why we propose HHIT and some other related matters. So the first comment from Daniel mentioned it's really reasonable to have additional background information around the RIP ecosystem. But of course, some text need to be simplified, need to be cleared. So that is actually aligned with our current understanding, right? So I don't want to read through what Daniel has said, but I think that's actually aligned with our current understanding. Next slide. So, but the recent review we get from Eric and Stefan kind of post a different direction. Eric mentioned that it's kind of unusual to have normative wording in the architecture draft, right? But that is not prohibited, which is great news. But we need to deal with the normative word. To reply to that, since revision 10, we already removed or replaced normative wording in those sections. As I mentioned earlier, not sure this is acceptable yet because I don't receive any comments. So hopefully can get some comment later. Then Stefan also expressed similar concerns regarding the mixed solution with the architecture discussion. So those are 3 main comments. For me, it's kind of roadblock. How should I address the comments? Because the comment received so far really focus in these 3 sections. Next slide, please. So in order to move us forward, I think we need to make a decision in this meeting. How to fix this issue, right? This is but I want to remind us, right, before I think sometime around 108 or 109, we have agreed that drip architecture is actually a solution-based architecture, right? It's kind of informational, but it's also proposed some sort of a solutions, right? Not only we should include the entities around the drip and explain how each components talk to each other, as that's we have done in section 1. And also we need to propose a solution how to fulfill the requirement specified in the requirement draft, without repeating the text in the requirement. So that is a decision we have made to keep architecture draft separately from the requirement and also solution space. So that being said, in my opinion, I think including all the co-authors from offline discussion, we believe all those sections should stay. But of course, some of the details, as Daniel mentioned already, we needed to be justified. That can be done. But before we even moving forward to fixing stuff, we need a working group of consensus if we should keep these sections, right? Now we are in the working group last call. I think we needed to ask specifically that if we want to keep section 415, then I guess things is much easier. We just follow up with the comments and fix it point by point. But on the contrary, if we don't want this in the architecture draft, and just to be honest, I don't know how to move forward without even talking about HHIT, because I think that's a decision we made a long time ago. In the end, in my humble opinion, I think it's just, those sections actually provide a really great introduction information for the solutions base, right? Things like US ID or authentication draft, right? Without this background information, the solution space seems like a weight. It's a little weak to me. So here's the main issues. Here's the things I want us to think about that, and to at least we should know clearly what we should do for the final publication. Also, there's some minor comments regarding too many acronyms, and I think that's a fair comment. We definitely need to fix that. I think that's all I want to discuss. This is the last slide. That's all I wanted to discuss. And so floor is open, and I want to hear the other comments regarding how we deal this. Right.
Anyone in the queue?
I am.
The floor is yours. Yeah.
Okay.
Please go.
I had to be careful. I had to be careful about speaking out of school here and some of the other meetings I've been in. Our architecture draft presents IETF as an SDO, as a player in this whole arena, and what we are bringing to the UAS arena. So having the architecture structure as it is very powerful for outside our community. And that is a document that I've been first pointing people to see what we are doing, what we are bringing. Things which are probably going to be coming up in the next number of months in discussions. This becomes a key document. And then I point them to the other documents. I just had yesterday another individual representing yet another community, pointing them to work that we're doing here. So we need to look at this, that we are, with this document, we are not just here in the IETF. We are the IETF as an SDO participating in a much larger community. And that's why I feel that the structure we have achieved is important. And that's all I want to say with regard to keeping 4, 5, and 6 as they are, because all three of them I've been pointing people to. Enough of my soapbox.
Dude, I just lost audio.
No. Who is next?
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
Med, are you here?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you handle the queue, because I don't see the queue.
Stewart is next. Please. Stewart.
Okay.
Okay, I only have one quick comment. The only new architectural entities that DRIP has introduced into the UAS RID pre-existing architecture are the finders and the crowdsourced RID supplemental data service provider. So I feel that if the architecture document is supposed to talk about all of the entities in our architecture, section 6 needs to remain in the architecture document.
Thank you, Stuart. Eric?
So first, my major concern was about this using this master uppercase and basically using normative language into an informational document. You have put everything in lowercase. You may want to remove as well and I think in section 2, you still keep, oh, we are using what's called BCP 14. So remove it. Now, my major concern is solved. Okay, we could go over, but I think it's solved a nice way. About the section 4, 5, and 6, I think they describe the H-hit and the registry. I'm a little bit concerned if we put some content here and we got other draft, the two documents must be consistent. Okay, specifically, if the architecture draft is going forward quickly, and it seems pretty close, working group last call, and then we change our mind and we changed the other document and we change what H-hit is, right? That's a major concern. Now, if we are confident that it's not a concern, we can go forward. But my major concern, and again, it's simply my concern, and my concern is simply to ease the IETF last call and the ISG evaluation here, right? Just provide you guidance. Nothing was blocking there.
Thank you, Eric. This is really, I would say, an important comment to hear from the, I would say, the editors. And yeah, and we need to work out how to better articulate with tanks in the architectural document so that it can be, I would say, a base reference for the work we are doing, and I would say the main entry point for the contribution from the working group. Yeah. So should I please take note of that, and we will discuss how to handle that. Daniel, please.
Yeah. So. I think we are all heading in the same direction. So I think the sections 4, 5, 6 are important. And as mentioned, Eric, I mean, we should not have something, the architecture document should not be completely abstracted from the solution space, but it should not tie too much to it. So we need to find the middle ground so that when someone reads the document, he understands what an HIIT is, why we use that, what is the main principle, the main motivations for that, how it's going to articulate with the registries, and so on. And I mean, the discussion should be sufficiently high level so that if we have some changes in 6 months, 1 year, it's not going to affect the full architecture. So, I mean, the way we described should give a good insight, a good understanding of the reader, how the documents are going to be articulated, and not the document, the concepts. And then, I mean, the solution space documents are here to say, oh yeah, in the architecture dimension, yeah, we have a small radio frame, so we need that authentication framework so that we can carry the RADs. Oh yeah, we need to be able to bind that RID to some information in registries and so on. And then if we use DNS and we use or something else, it's not a big. I mean, it should not be a big problem later. So I think it's all about finding the right middle, the right balance between those two things.
And actually, I fully agree with you on this one, Daniel. No problem, right? We can, as long as it's not normative, and basically put all the balls and we cannot move anymore. If we keep the door open to some not major change, but minor change, refinement, everything is fine. I'm quite happy with the quickly browse to the document you just released, and I'm way more happy than before. And again, I'm not the final word here.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Daniel. So the next one is Adam, and then we will close the line just right after Bob.
Yeah, so I'm going to agree with Daniel on this, and Eric as well, on everything that was just stated. I think the best frame of mind to walk into this is when you look and read the architecture document, it is general enough that in 6 months, we don't have to completely rewrite it. We're using UAS remote ID as the first use case. There might be a use case in a year from now, which is like, oh, we're going to do microcontrollers and IoT-esque devices. We don't want to have it so bounded to that. So like, for example, broadcast remote ID, that crowdsourced remote ID thing is very much a UAS remote ID concept, I think. So I'm torn on Section 6 being either an architecture in the UAS RID draft. I'm not quite sure where it should go because it is very much a UAS remote ID thing because that's where it applies. But as a general concept, it's good. So I think if we find that balance that Daniel and Eric were pointing out, I think that would be the best way forward.
Thank you, Adam. Bob?
If we can maybe do a little softening of the words and say, this is technology which is the way that you want to look at solving this architecture. And then 3 years from now, there may be other technology which will be invented, which also will solve this, fit into this architecture. Maybe that's a way to address some of these things that's saying that, well, what about something else? Make the architecture use HHIT and use the registry as here are ways that, look at this technology as this is how it can be done. And then the later documents say, and this is how we are doing it. But then make it so it's also an example of what any technology needs to do to meet the requirements or meet the design, the framework. Now if that helps or not. And I'll look at that and review that with Shao.
Yeah. For example, section 4 is HHIT for DERIP entity identifiers. I think the section should be, the title, just the title should be more the DERIP identifiers, and then we explain why HHIT is a valid choice and how it's going to be to be articulated with
I don't think it takes much of a change to do that.
No.
We're pretty close to that in terms of wording, changing the title, adding maybe another sentence and softening another sentence. We can show that and then dive into, and this is what this brings to the architecture. So somebody comes up with some other great idea, say, well, you got to be able to do as well as this, if not better. Again, I have to be careful not speaking out of school for some of the other groups I'm in and some of the other fun discussions I've been party to. I hate groups that have closed meetings.
Thank you, Bob. So, Shoaib, please, if you can conclude in 1 minute so that we can move to the next slide. Yeah.
All right, 1 minute. That's great. So this is a great comment. I'm so glad we talk about that. This is really make things clear. Just want to echo Stu first. The cross-source ID is actually not new. It has been there. We just cherry pick it and put it in section 6. And I think that's a great piece of information we needed to put in the architecture. Thanks. This is only one piece of information, bridged broadcast ID to network ID, and this is for future looking, right? Even though FAA said, okay, we only need a broadcast here right now, right? But network ID should be the future. So that's one of the piece of information we should keep it. Then regarding the section 2, definitely we should remove the normative wording. And I think I thought I did some good work, but looks like I missed something. And now for section 4 and 5, being consistent with the solution space, that's something we really need to be careful. I think Daniel put a good comment in the GitHub, which is really regarding what kind of level the details we should put in there. I think we needed to, the co-authors needed to at least work closely to identify things we are for sure won't be changed, at least in half a year, a couple of years. But if ASTM decide, okay, we want to change the byte numbers, right, and change from 200 to 300, then that's something we are actually out of control. Section 4, and then I think the last, we have just said we should change the title, right? And Daniel mentioned that already. We should be, I think we should be good to go. As I think last email we see from Daniel, I think we should be address your comments so in a couple of weeks. That should be doable. All right. Hopefully I'm not missing anything. Just let me know. Thank you.
Right. So
Yep.
I think we can move on to the next presentation. Thank you, Shuai. So just to sum up, we're quite close to the end of the tunnel, so no big mess in that document. But that's the discussion worth it. So let's move to the next presentation, unless we have any other comments.
Hello, can you hear me well?
Yeah. Is it Andre?
Yes, should I start?
Yeah, sure.
I think, yeah, now we see the slides again. So my name is Andre Gurtov, and I'm going to present an update on DRIP implementation status from students' work at Linköping University. So first few slides are going to be the same as last time, except that today I have a bit more time to go from them in the detail. And then I'm going to jump to the actual implementation status. So the starting point for our code was OpenHIP version 2, which is available on Bitbucket. And the draft was new crypto 06 from Bob, but I think current one is 09. But I think actual code now supports 07 or 08, something in there in between. And there were 4 students working on that code because it's a prerequisite for drone ID. And then the actual code for drone ID was this Open Drone ID project. And this was part of advanced project on secure systems in Linköping University, which was run last fall. And we are going to have it again next year. So in next fall, we can hope to get to another level in the implementation. Next slide, please. So what is needed to implement DRIP is some new cryptographic features from HIP. So new crypto algorithm based on Edwards digital signature algorithm, and also new ORCID. So if you know, the part of IPv6 address space is reserved for things like host identity protocol and also mobile IP. So it's needed to implement an extension to ORCID to have so-called hierarchical hits. So in the beginning, the hit was just sort of 128-bit hash when there was some prefix added to it. And later there is a need to have fewer instances to have some hierarchy. So like who actually issued this HIT host identity tag, which is a hash of host public key. Next slide, please. So ORCID is essentially a combination of a few things. Like in traditional ORCID, it was a prefix, then ORCID generation algorithm ID. So it's a type of a hash function which is used to generate it, like SHA-2 or SHA-256 or SHA-3 and so on. And then the prefix, which is part of IPv6 address space, which is reserved by IANA. And the final hash, which is 96-bit long, which is a hash of public key of a host identity. But the new ORCID modified it so that there is this new field called info, which is part of a hash, so which gives the name of the authority which generated this particular hash. So, for example, each company can have its own version of registry for these hits, and not like a completely global space. Of course, it makes the hash itself shorter, which increases probability of collisions. So it's not maybe any more guaranteed that two hosts can have statistically unique hits. So we need maybe increased need for hit collision detection and resolution. Next, please. And why do we need this?
I'm not hearing Andrew.
I think he went poof.
Okay,
Because
can
he's
you?
gone.
I'm back.
There you
right?
go.
Okay.
Yeah, now you're back.
Okay, maybe connection cut. So EDDSA is more efficient than even normal elliptic curve. Not speaking about like traditional RSA and DSA, which just have huge key sizes. So for some lightweight things such as IoT and drones, we need the algorithm which is fast, but also has very small signature size. And also that's the reason why we need something better than advanced encryption standard for symmetric crypto, because this KIAC cipher is a more lightweight alternative. And in the current code, we also starting to move to so-called HUDIAC cipher, which is a candidate for lightweight crypto competition in NIST. But it's not kind of clear if it's going to win or not. So we are following the situation and we're updating the code to HUDIAC support at the moment. And final thing is this key derivation function, because it's this key DDF is more efficient than the other previous functions. So again, for lightweight devices such as drones running on battery, it's an important factor. Next, please. So the current status, like the project basically ended by the new year, and these latest curves are supported now, as well as EDDSA host identity generation based on these curves. Also, the new ARKits based on hierarchical hits are implemented, and the key derivation function based on KIAC, so KKDF. And KIAC is implemented as a cipher, lightweight cipher alternative, as well as HUDIAC is in the process. And it was tested in the core simulator that this basic change with HIP version 2 works fine and succeeds. So the code is kind of ready for use. Next slide, please. As we know, DRIP is based on using HIP version 2 HIT. So basically broadcasting it over Bluetooth or 4 and 5 or Wi-Fi, like maybe in traditional mode or in so-called NAAM mode, neighborhood awareness node. So the test bed and implementation was using Raspberry Pi as a tool to implement it. So you can like attach it to the drone as a kind of legacy way to support drones, or maybe future drones can implement it directly. But the latest Drone ID seminar in Europe I attended, there is actually already several companies implementing those add-on boxes to comply with EU laws. So it seems to be also an option just to buy this small box and stick it to your old drone, and you become kind of compatible and legal. And the challenge is the size. So in Bluetooth 4, there is like only 20 bytes, so it's kind of hard to fit things into it. And also there was a receiver Android application developed so that the observer and the policeman can see which drones are flying nearby. So it receives this broadcast information and displays it on the screen, as well as a backend, so some kind of web server which keeps track of registry, like which drones, which hits corresponds to which drone owner, and so on. Next slide. So the current proposals, like in EU and STSM, they have no trust in broadcast messages. So if DRIP is supported, then we basically broadcast this hierarchical hit, which is generated based on ORCID from public key of a drone. And the implementation that I'm going to talk about is based on this draft version from, I think, end of October. So the architecture and the protocol draft. So now I guess we are a bit forward, but basic things should still work. So next slide. So the current status is that the application is implemented on an Android phone and tested. And it can use like Google Maps to display the drone coordinates on a map. And this information is fetched from a backend server, which is kind of alpha implementation of HIP registry, which DRIP registry, which has things like operator ID position and so on. And on Raspberry Pi, so RPA is Raspberry Pi, there is a script that basically implements DRIP in a very simple way. So what it does, it downloads latest OpenHIP version, installs, generates public key hit, and then uses another script to broadcast it over Bluetooth. So kind of very simple way to implement DRIP. Next slide.
So the drone is the Raspberry Pi.
Yes, in this case,
okay.
You can kind of stick your Raspberry Pi to a drone. So basically, there are two scripts. One that configures Raspberry Pi to have a correct version of OpenSSL, because well, actually, it was a huge job to upgrade OpenHIP to support OpenSSL reasonably late version, because there were a lot of changes, but still it's not like the latest version, so we need to use configure that. And the other script actually takes a hit from the file system and then broadcasts it using Bluetooth frames. Next slide. So this is a format of Bluetooth 4 standard. So as you can see, the payload is not big, something like 20 bytes, and well, hit is 4 bytes, so it's not like that big. But if you need additional things like signature and so on, which are part of a DRIP, it's like maybe not enough. But for Bluetooth 5, there is going to be increased sizes, and hopefully it's going to work. But even for Raspberry Pi, it says it implements Bluetooth 5. It's actually only implements limited features, part of it. But now we acquired also USB sticks that have full Bluetooth 5 support. So hopefully in autumn we can experiment more with that part. Next slide. And since Bluetooth standards were reasonably compatible, it's kind of easy to move between versions and easy to use with just few lines of code. And there is good support for Android for scanning Bluetooth beacons, so it was relatively easy to implement this application. And some preliminary tests that indicate that Bluetooth 4 is roughly 100 meters and Bluetooth 5 maybe half a kilometer, so much larger range. And also The payload is much bigger in Bluetooth 5, so it's going to be more compatible and better implementation. Next slide. And this is actually the funny script which implements DRIP in Raspberry Pi. So basically, you first install write libraries when you install write OpenSSL version, when you install OpenHIP, and in the end, you call another script which just takes HIT from a file system and sends it via Bluetooth. So it's kind of simple and hacky way to implement basic DRIP. Next slide. And the backend kind of alpha version of HIP registry was based on this web technologies, which has some database which maps HIT to things like position of operator, owner name, model of aircraft, and so on. So it's kind of backend which is used for database. Next slide. So in this picture, you can see the basic idea that this drone is flying and broadcasting HIT. And when this Android application actually makes a lookup in the backend, in the server, to get some current information about drone, let's say, owner and maybe some geographical position and so on. And then the application can use this information to create a picture of the drones flying in the area. Next slide. So this application was based on Java and Gradle, and using Google Maps API to actually place the markers and download the geographical map picture of this area. Next slide. So this screenshots from the application. So it, for example, here it shows like 6 drones in this area with certain IDs which are being broadcast. And you see them also mapped on the geographical map of Linköping being placed somewhere on the map. Next slide. So this Android application was based on OpenDroneID and basically performs a parser of Bluetooth messages, and then using Google Maps API displays it on the map. So it's a bit limited because it's based on Bluetooth 4, but as I said, we plan to go to 5. Also, we didn't have like a device which is supporting Wi-Fi neighborhood awareness node mode. I think Raspberry Pis don't do that. So, but I think latest devices from like Galaxy, maybe S10 already does it. So maybe in the autumn we try to get this kind of phone and then experiment with NAN mode, because it's much better way. You don't need to root your mobile phone to actually implement it. So it's much easier for like a normal user just to download the application from a store and then start using it instead of turning phone into the hacking mode. Next. Yeah, so Bluetooth 5 is on our to-do list, and NAN mode, and then adding certificates to a broadcast so that the heat is authenticated, and maybe provide some better visualization in the application. For example, maybe have a marker reflect somehow size of a drone and speed, or some how dangerous is it, or something like that, so that, for example, users can have a better view of what's happening in the area and what kind of drones are flying there. Next. So to conclude, there was some simple version of DRIP implemented based on HIP version 2 extensions. And yeah, some problems were faced with limited support of Bluetooth 5 and Wi-Fi mode inside of Raspberry Pi. But in future, we hope to use the latest sticks and USB sticks and maybe latest smartphones to have better and more full implementation. But the good thing is that OpenHIP is more or less complete and ready to be utilized for this. So seems to be a good way forward. So if there are any questions, I can answer. Yeah, and just to add that I went for the trouble to become official drone pilot in EU, so I had to read like 200 pages of documentation and pass 2 hours online exam. So it was actually pretty complex. I mean, like more difficult than getting a driving license, it seems. So not too many people are flying drones nowadays in Europe, I guess.
Well, thank you, Andre, for the presentation. Any comments, any questions? I'm hearing Stuart.
I'm wondering when we might consider doing a plug fest to check interoperability of the independently developed implementations that you have there at the university and that we have at the New York UAS test site. I'm not in a big rush to do that. I think we've got some work to do before we can, but I think it would be a great thing to do at some point.
Yes, maybe in IETF, which is going to be in the autumn, we can have some kind of hackathon or interop session. And the students are active again.
I think that would be highly appreciated and really help. I mean, the draft to. I mean, it would provide some additional confidentiality that the specifications are working, and I think that's going to ease the process. I don't know how much is required, but I'm letting Eric to jump on that. So, Eric, are you here?
Yeah, I was there. I was
okay.
Simply taking time to find back the right button on the right window.
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes. So now, I understand you asked me a question. Can you rephrase it, Daniel?
Okay, so we were talking about interoperability because we know there are 2 ongoing implementations of the specifications. And the question that I was asking is how much having an interoperability before moving the specification forward is helpful or not.
I mean, it's always helpful, right? So in some working groups, specifically in routing area, they require absolutely to have 2 interoperable implementation before going to working group last call. Now, we are not that far, but proving that we have 2 interoperable implementation obviously makes things way easier after, right? So you don't need to document it.
Mm-hmm.
You can do a draft, you can get a wiki page, or whatever you want, but having a trail somewhere that people can go and see in public that's happening, that's perfect. It helps a lot, honestly, in some working group.
So that's highly encouraged.
Absolutely.
Okay. So let's move to the.
I think
Robert, does it answer?
Show I in the queue also.
Okay, I don't see the queue.
Yeah,
apparently.
I would just point. I'm in the queue. I would just point out that interop for DRIP is fraught with needing to have the devices within radio range. This makes it, with our virtual work, challenging. I mean, potentially Andre could ship code to Adam, and Adam could put some stuff together and see maybe that he can actually run Andre's code there at the New York test site. But until we get to San Francisco, where potentially we could have a physical hackathon, this is not like other IETF efforts which can be done across the net. We have to be in radio range.
Yeah, that was the assumption, Bob. Thank you. Shuai, please.
Yeah, I think IETF is great, but we're really not there yet, right? I mean, I think the first step is really to find the people, find the time, come up with a open platform that everybody can experience what Dripper looks like, right? I mean, everybody can get a drone now. It's not that hard to experience, right? There's so many open source code bases like Open Drone ID and some cheap Bluetooth module people can buy. I mean, if we can come up with some really basic code base for people to start with, that would be fantastic to help a Drip move forward. All right, thank you.
Thank you. So let's move to the next presentation.
Okay, can you hear me now? We're good?
Yeah.
Okay, let's just go right into the first content slide. If you can go down, Daniel. And we have the final rules from the FAA being published. This is our first final rules out in the world, so that's what we're kind of targeting with. EU is not too far behind, but we have these final rules which are there for us to be working against. These are supposed to be performance-based rules. They expect SDOs to now actually say how it's done and then produce an MOC. That's not for the IETF to do, but are kind of like inserting into the process. An important thing, which is part of these final rules, is if they remove the network remote ID, and I won't go into the whys and wherefores, and where and how that may change in the future, but they added something they call the remote ID module for upgrading non-compliant existing UAs. And this is going to be important, and particularly what Andre has built is a remote ID module. It's not what's controlling the plane. And this is an important distinction in the FAA and also what's coming out in Europe potentially as well. Point is, we now have a target deadline, supposedly, when vendors are going to be wanting to create code and put product out. We just received a 2.5 month extension of the deadline that came out just a couple of days ago from the FAA. Where they, because of reviews, because of the new administration, everything being extended. So there's been a 2.5 month push out of deadlines. But nonetheless, we now have final rules. We now have deadlines. We now have things to target to. And like I said, the big thing now is these remote ID modules are firmly defined in the final rules. You can see them if you just go to the summary. You don't have to go through the whole rules. Just look at the executive summary, and you'll see what's about these modules, being able to snap them onto a UA to be able to participate in remote ID. Next slide, please. And because of these modules, the FAA says that these modules cannot use session IDs, whereas inside the UA, you can have session IDs. They can only use the serial number of the remote module, not the serial number of the UA, but these remote modules have their own serial number, which is encoded in the CTA 2063A format only. That's the way the rule is written right now and doesn't leave much wiggle room. From discussions that I've been participating in, don't expect FAA to change the rules in regard to that. So what did I do? I came with a way that hierarchical hits can be encoded in the CTA 2063 format, so that these modules could benefit from hierarchical hits and be able to use them and to be able to use the auth, though this would not be a session ID that can be, in theory, changed for each operation, but it's rather set in it. But potentially the manufacturer could use this for creating their serial numbers and then benefit from the rest of it. So that is an important addition, and why I added it. I added it to meet the FAA definition of the RID modules. So take a look at that and understand why I did that. The other thing that I did per our chairs is I took the auth draft and I merged it in, creating some new definitions and creating Appendix F. So I pretty much lifted what Adam had in Auth 06, did some massaging of it, and there's Appendix F. So you should see that I've completed, I've done things there, and I've done that merge in. Those are if you do a diff between version 4 and version 9, I think our current version is 9 or is it 7, or whatever it is, you'll see that those are the only substantial changes in the document. Move on to the next slide, please. Because we have the final rules, ASTM group 38.02, which is the owner of the 3411 document that we're working against, has restarted. They're looking at what changes were made and now coming out with which would be a version 1.1. They need to do this quickly because of, again, these deadline timeframes for manufacturers to put it into their equipment. We can expect to have an ID type allocated for hierarchical hits. That's pretty much a no-brainer and agreed upon. We are requesting changes to the authentication menu. Those changes are in the queue. Thing to note is that the FAA removed all cybersecurity from the final rules. The preliminary rules had a lot of cybersecurity. There's nothing about cybersecurity in the final rules. So people are asked, why is this message now needed? I won't go into why. It's kind of like future proofing areas. We can expect a resolution on all this from ASTM F3802 by the end of March, and know what are our, in a sense, marching orders. What can we work with? But we can work with, yes, there will be an ID type allocated for hierarchical hits, and there will be some changes made to the authentication message such that what we are doing will fit into our proposal will be accepted in some form. Moving on. I can't speak out of school. Yeah.
Okay. I was just wondering. I didn't get why cybersecurity has been removed.
You'd have to go through all the comments that and the responses that in the final rules, the FAA has a whole set of discussions. Here are the comments they received. And here's what various companies' positions on this, some for and some against. And here's the action we took. So if you want to understand why they removed it, it was basically either vendors saying that this is too hard, too much of a demand on our processor. Oh, this is only within radio range. Why are you concerned about this? Because you have security, because the range is only a half a kilometer per the Bluetooth 5. So it's kind of cute stuff. And there's, like I said, if you want to understand why, look at the final rules and look at the FAA was pretty good at including that debate. And I don't want to spend any time. It is what it is.
Okay.
We're kind of coming out saying that all this discussion. I will say something. What we're doing here is saying that yes, we had all this discussion because people didn't know how to do it. Here we are, an SDO saying, and here is how it can be done inside the capacity of these devices. Okay, great. So we're sticking our foot in the fire here, in a sense. As an aside, and I posted this to the 110 mailing list that you may have seen, is that anyone here involved in E911 location accuracy? Because the FAA wants a 15-foot altitude at 95% for the ground control station. And the discussion has been that this may not be possible with current affordable tech. I won't go bore you with other debate items, but this particular one, I've been asked to go out on a fishing expedition to find out if there's people elsewhere who are familiar with E911 and how the telco community is meeting the elevation altitude requirement of E911, because FAA wants to do the same for remote ID, so that, for instance, the first responder can know that the operator is on the 3rd floor balcony, not that operator on the 4th floor balcony. So it looks like that if you look at the GCS documents themselves at gss.gov, they're saying plus or minus 13 meters. So it's I'm reaching out for people who have any experience in this, and I have gotten a couple of people respond. So this is just an aside. So, but what still needs to be done? And the big thing is I need to merge what I did in Appendix E into what's in Appendix F. And I'm pretty much done that, but I need to resolve this replay issue. And I'm interested in input into this. IDEO in Appendix E and replay in one way. Appendix F really does not address replay. What is I have, the timestamp I have in Appendix E is the time that it was created and expecting the observer to not trust it beyond a certain period of time. Appendix F has a use by date, but it allows it to be too large. I will be posting to the list my thoughts on this. I think what it's going to be is that in the using an attestation in the broadcast mode, i.e. using the authentication message, that the timestamp is a future out no more than 1 minute. That this particular attestation can only be trusted for a very short period of time. And that's what I need to say to protect against the replay attack. But I'll be posting that to the list, and this is this important discussion because if we are supplying trust here and we want to protect against fraudulent use, we need to be able to constrain this. I see Russ is in the queue and Stuart, so let's process the queue before I go forward. And chairs, can you open up the queue?
Yeah, Stuart, please.
Oh, Stuart dropped off. Russ.
Hi. The Cell Phone Industry Association did a 911 accuracy test for location, and if you want to get in touch with those people, I can introduce you.
Thank you. Please do, because it'd be interesting to see how they achieved it, the accuracy that is required, which is 3 meters, and the FAA is kind of willing to settle for 4 meters, though they do ask for 3 meters.
Well, the concern here was if you're dealing with a metropolis, the first responders go to the wrong floor, you've cost a lot of time.
Exactly. It is a different use case. I understand the use case, and our use case is they're trying to find the operator for whatever reason.
Is my audio working this time?
Yeah.
Okay, so just a quick answer on the why did cybersecurity get entirely dropped? Because they dropped for the moment, and they were clear that this was only for the moment, network remote ID and retained only broadcast remote ID. And further, because broadcast remote ID does not even require a two-way Bluetooth or Wi-Fi link, it can be simply a broadcast from a transmitter on the aircraft that doesn't even have receive capability. They assumed that totally eliminated all cyber vulnerabilities in the system, which I find horribly naive, but that was the reasoning.
Okay, thank you.
And they basically just punted on the issue of fraud on the content. So the next point is I need to fix the DNS examples. Stuart and Adam have given me some content and what I need to put in there, so I need to work on that. One of the things here is that we are looking at some of the stuff we're putting under some aerial TLD, but I have talked to 2 different companies that say these hardcore hits are so interesting. we can use in what we want to do. And they're not aviation related at all. So that's why I kind of would like to see if we can find a home for the DNS structure for hierarchical hits, which is not in aeronautics and allows that some of the space to be used in aeronautics, but some of the space potentially used. Otherwise, each group is going to IANA for their own prefix, which is not good. So that's one of the things which I need to dance around. And again, I'll be asking for help on the list coming up on that. But I think that's it.
When you mean they are not from the aeronautic industry, they're not also from the DNS industry. They are from another kind of industry.
Well, there's some IoT industry.
Yeah.
They're just perfectly happy to have DNS be able to look up and find stuff. And they want to be able to have hierarchical hits work for them as well, and that they have their RAA that they will have for their community. So it's like that's what I hope would have happened, and that I'm in conversation with one company about what they're doing. So I need to allow for that. And I'll be posting some of this to the list coming up. But those are the only two areas left right now, based on any changes that discussion on architecture will get to me. That those are two things I need to fix based on comments I've received, and then we're open for last call. And I need to get that out hopefully before Passover comes at the end of this month. That's my goal, to get something out before Passover, which is the last week of March.
Thank you, Bob. Just on time to move to the next slide.
Any question known? So, next presentation.
Hello, you guys hear me all right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I will actually have Michael Pelage also be joining me today midway through this presentation, but I'll be starting it off. So these are some draft updates on the drafts that are not on working group last call. So the authentication format was adopted on the 18th of December last year. The document is up on GitHub. I moved it up there so that it was publicly available. It's in Markdown, so you guys can go and look at it, post comments, PR requests, issues, however you feel comfortable. Once we get a rhythm with architecture, I think it'll just naturally flow into this document. The document is currently on a hold. This is just due to, as Bob was mentioning in his last presentation, there are some F3411 updates that are coming up in the authentication message. Two of them are the FEC. Some of our FEC work might be integrated into ASTM itself, which negates the need for it to be in our draft. So I need to see where that ends up landing, and also to harmonize a bit better. There's some discussion on an auth type and a pseudo drip header of some capacity in the message itself, but those are more ASTM specific. But in general, we are in queue, and once changes are confirmed, we will update the draft accordingly. So the also uploaded actually earlier last month was the registries draft. So this is just a stub of previous work when we broke apart some other drafts. The identity claims draft was ripped apart, and some bits went to Bob's draft, some bits went to architecture, some bits came from architecture and got thrown into this draft, some bits from auth formats. So this is a bit of like where all the registry stuff has landed, because we had written text previously in lots of other documents. So this is where it's now sitting. The main thing that this draft does hold is the provisioning process, a somewhat detailed one for interactions between the parties to get IDs registered into DNS, at least on a high level. So we just need some wordsmithing, I think, on that side and figure out where it fits in the draft. I do have some missing sections. How the ID is added and updated to link to a serial number via probably EPP, how the ID is looked up to get a serial number, but only by authorized parties using RDAP, and exactly what fields need to be in the registry. And me and Michael Pelage have been working in the background the past 3 weeks, going back and forth, trying to figure this out and get a little bit more concrete detail on. And I think with that, if we go to the next slide, I believe the next slide is going to be Michael's portion. So Michael, you may take the stage.
Hello, can everybody hear me?
We can hear you.
Yeah.
Excellent. So what I'd like to do is give an update on what we've been up to since IETF 108, when I first presented the concept of what the potential registry would look like. And what I've done is, in the context of another GTLD.music that we'll be launching, we have actually come up with a full registry sandbox that deals with authenticated users, and also uses RDAP to provide differentiated access to different data about contactoids stored in the registry. So these are important concepts that we think are important in the broader DRIPS discussion, because there clearly needs to be some account of data privacy considerations, particularly in Europe with the GDPR, as well as balancing those with the needs of first responders and law enforcement. So right now we have come up with operational code in the .music top-level domain. We will be going public with this within ICANN and later this month. And then what Adam and I, Bob and Stu, will be doing is looking at how to take that code and begin to modify that to handle a potential mock-up of what a .drone registry would look like. As Adam had just mentioned before, we are beginning to look at what those different profiles of those contactoids for DRIP, what the individual data elements would need to contain, and the potential access to those data elements by different requesters within the ecosystem. One other thing that I will be touching upon in this presentation today is some recent legal and regulatory updates from Europe, particularly in the area of cybersecurity. So while the FAA has temporarily punted on cybersecurity, interestingly enough, the European Union, as part of their NIS2 initiative, actually has some specific enumerated areas which potentially intersect with the work of this group. Next slide, please. So my apologies for the non-ASCII diagram here, but in the interest of time, it was a lot easier. This was the original concept that I shared with the group during IETF 108, and the main concept that we were trying to convey with this diagram here was the idea of a registry providing different authoritative sources in a distributed manner, recognizing that we were not trying to create a single mother of all databases to hold everything. We realized that in order to meet certain national requirements, there would need to be a distribution of certain data sources, and how that data would be done in an authoritative way, but then allow the contactoids move seamlessly between the different participants within the ecosystem. So again, just what we're looking at is potential manufacturers being able to write globally so that all participants would be able to have that, but then recognizing that some data elements would be stored nationally, recognizing certain data localization laws within some countries. Next slide.
Just, do we expect overlap between the data, or is it data
No.
hosted at one?
So there will be some. So one of the things that will obviously be very important here, and you'll see that I think with the manufacturers, is there needs to be global uniqueness There needs to be global uniqueness with, if you will, the product, the drones that are entering into the broader ecosystem, and then the ability to provide uniqueness for individual identifiers of the operators. That can actually be done by using a second level domain. What we were proposing here was using sort of mimicking the ISO 31662 character, using that as a second level, and then allowing a local registry in country to store that particular operator pilot information. But then because the drones would be written globally, that local registry would be able to have the ability to take that contact droid and have access to it. So that is what we are trying to convey. And if I could go to the next slide real quick, I've actually come up with what I think is a good example to explain how this differentiation could potentially work. So for those people that may be familiar, the .co is the Colombian country code top level domain. Although this is a CCTLD, .co has been marketed as a hybrid. It is recognized in country as serving the Colombian local internet community, but then is also broadly marketed as an alternate GTLD to the broader internet community. And what's interesting here, when you look at the particular ecosystem of what they've done, is there are one set of registrars and resellers that sell second level domains at the second level in .co. But then there are, if you will, third level registrations occurring in .org and .com in the .co space. Those registrations are again done through a series of competitive registrars and resellers. So this is where you would see the USSs and other people providing a dynamic marketplace to provide the services. The other example I use here to show a perhaps more restrictive access within this hierarchical namespace is mil.co. There are third level domains registered in mil.co that are not available to commercial registrars to provide those services. Those are in fact issued by the government itself. So this was kind of an example of a parallel when some people were trying to wrap their arms around the ability of having different authoritative data, if you will, federated but interoperable within an ecosystem. We thought that this is, again, one example, a potential analog. Moving forward to the next slide. And this was also something that was, this was a table that was presented in IETF 108. This, in trying to, if you will, explain to regulators and other people that may not be as intimately involved in the drone space, we have talked about this concept of VIN numbers. So I believe one question about globally unique. So much like VIN numbers, are, you know, when a car rolls off of a manufacturing assembly line somewhere in the world, there is a VIN number associated with that vehicle, and that VIN number is globally accessible. So that would be something that every participant in the ecosystem, they would require uniqueness as well as access to that identifier. Then when you get into the individual license plates, which would be affixed to the drones, or the individual drone operator, a credentialing or licensing, that would be the equivalent of the driver's license. So these are some of the authoritative data sources that a registry will need to track to allow the UTMs and the USSs to begin to exchange data in an interoperable and in a unique manner. Next slide, please. So what as again, Adam had touched on this before, we have begun to go through some of the different data elements and what are those profiles of the different roids within the ecosystem. So what are those repository object identifiers that are going to be exchanged within the EPP registry, and what are the underlying data elements that are going to be necessary? Not only are we looking at what data is going to need to be collected, but we are also identifying what data potentially would have PII associated with it, because that then may trigger a differentiated access to that underlying data based upon the credentials of the registrar. So this is some of the, as Adam had alluded to, what we've been doing over the past 3 weeks is trying to sketch out what the minimum ROIDs would be for an initial registry deployment, and then expanding that as we begin to get a fuller view of who all of the participants are in the ecosystem. Next slide, please.
Okay, so I'm actually going to take over for here. So this is a diagram. I'm using ASCII art, so sorry, Michael. I'm stepping above you a little bit in classiness. So this is a registry key value and lookup link diagram. So there are 5 main registry key values that we need to keep track of in a DRIP ecosystem: the serial number, the UA session ID, the USS account ID, the UA registration number, and the operator registration number. And you can only look up certain information if you're authorized. So for example, authorized personnel only could look up from a UA session ID to a serial number, which a serial number in this case and in any subsequent slide is an ANSI CTA 2063-A. And it's either the serial number of the aircraft itself or of the UA's remote ID module, something that Bob touched on in his presentation, that these modules were introduced and are required to use these serial numbers. They cannot use a session ID. And only a CAA can look up from a serial number to a registration number, a UA's registration number that's in their database of registered aircraft in their flight area. And from that, get an operator registration number, which is considered PII. We're not quite sure on the link between UA session ID and the USS account ID. That's kind of a gray area. It might depend on the USS, but we imagine it is something more akin to like an authorized personnel, an admin of the USS, or a law enforcement agent who wants it can look it up. Next slide, please.
And do you expect any box to be DNS or?
So could you repeat the question, Daniel? Sorry.
Do you expect any Square box to be a DNS server, or I mean the database being a DNS, or?
Yes, partially. Let's go to the next slide, and I'll try to go a little bit deeper into that. So in this diagram, it's the same diagram as before, but you'll notice that I have it blocked out into 3 main areas: CAA maintained registries, manufacturer maintained registries, and USS maintained registries. Note that it's not that a USS has to go to a manufacturer maintained registry to get the serial number. It's more the authoritative location where the serial number would originate from and its main unit. In some scenarios, it might be a DNS entry. In other scenarios, it might be an actual database, like an honest-to-God database, not a DNS lookup. It depends on the use case scenario. Next slide, please. So this is an example of possible registries and their interlinks. So you'll notice that in all 3 of these, the serial number is in each one, but certain PII is in the CAA maintained registry, and only the session ID can be looked up to the serial number through an RDAP lookup. The DNS lookups to like get the certificates and the public keys for the hierarchical hit would be a DNS entry, but all the other information would not probably be DNS entries because they could be considered public information. The one where it's a bit of a gray area is the manufacturer registry. So you'll notice it says serial number, make, model, et cetera, et cetera. So you could have make, model, color, how many rotors it has, its weight, its size, dimensions. All of these things could be publicly accessible so that other registries can go and look this information up based on the serial number. And before Michael comes in, Stu's on the queue, and I imagine he's going to elaborate or correct me because I might have said something wrong.
Yeah, I just wanted to give Danielle a bit more of an answer on DNS.
Sure.
We don't anticipate that DNS will be extensively used to do lookups of the actual information that is associated in these different registries with these different identifiers that are used as unique keys in those registries. We do see a role for DNS, however, in getting you from one registry to another. So for instance, given a hierarchical hit, which is the registry in which you should be able to look up other information that could come from DNS.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Shuai?
Adam. Just one of the things I wanted to bring up in general aviation right now, if you actually file a flight plan, FAA does give you a general warning where the UES activities is, but there's no way they are showing either the June number or whatever the number it is, but in general aviation, the tail number. So in those numbers you're showing right now, you have the serial number, make, model, certification. What kind of number do you foresee can be used in that purpose? See, if it's going to show you, okay, this June serial number, which number is actually flying in what altitude?
Give me a minute to digest that.
So somebody just give the thing was said is if you're general aviation, you know, okay, if you type a tail number, you will see where this aircraft is flying right now, currently, what's
Right.
the flight plan they have filed, and who belongs to. And I would foresee in the near future, June could be the similar, right? If you fly June, you have flight
Right.
plan.
So
You probably know where the June is flying right now, and the data associated with STM data format.
So I'll fire a shot. I see Stu and Rob in the queue. I think Stu has the answer, the direct answer for you. But I'll say that the tail number that you're talking about is what I think I've marked as the UA registration number. I think the FAA is moving away from that and going to be using session IDs, and not so much the UA registration number to be passed around. I'm not 100% sure.
Then that would be a problem, right? For the Zoom, don't even have a networking connection. They only have a broadcast ID. That means the FAA there's no way to know like the details information for that Zoom, right? It has to be like either, I mean, for FAA to know, it has to be, as I said, if it's a session ID, it has to be network connections, right? But broadcast ID don't even have one. So that means for JIRP, we need to find some way to connect together, right? I mean, currently we have a draft request source ID, could be a potential solution for that.
So I see Bob and Stu have dropped into the participants.
Take Stu first. He may have the correct answer better than me.
Yeah.
I'll answer in several parts. First, the FAA is strongly discouraging the use of registration numbers by anybody other than themselves. They explicitly prohibit the use of the registration number as the UAS identifier. They don't prohibit, but they strongly discourage you publicizing that number in, for instance, the free text self-ID message. The information that the FAA expects to be able to look up from either a session ID by way of the serial number or from the serial number right from the get-go is first the UA registration number, that'll have a bunch of information about the aircraft, including to whom it is registered, which then leads to the operator registry, which has information about the operator. But both of these are essentially static information, not dynamic information like an operational intent, which is the UTM term for a flight plan. So interfaces between this and UTM are expected to exist, but as yet undefined and not required by the current rule.
And
Right.
I will add to that that there is a conflict that we are seeing, that Stu has pointed out, between what the FAA says they want to do versus what another section of the FAA is doing. But there is going to be a separation. We don't know what tail numbers are going to be moving forward. Will the tail numbers for UAS be the same as tail numbers currently and for manned aircraft, or are they going to be something else? This is a gray area, and we have an ability here, again, to be inserting some rational thought processes into it.
Right. Yeah, so by no means try and anybody that the diagrams the 3 diagrams that I've just presented over are set in stone. They are not. They are basically throw it at the wall for what we know right now, try to make it all fit and see where we landed, and then try to feed back to Michael and work with Michael to get something that is actually usable and in a registry up somewhere. So this is all nebulous at the end of the day. So I'll go to the next slide, and I'm handing it back to Michael, and I think he's going to talk about some legal side stuff now, which should be very interesting and maybe spark some discussion.
Yes, thank you, Adam. So we had heard earlier about the FAA punting on cybersecurity. As I referenced, the EU has actually dove into the deep end of the pool rather aggressively. As I referenced, this is the EU Cybersecurity Directive. It's NIS2. A draft of this was released late in December. There is talk about trying to finalize this sometime this year, although there needs to be through negotiations between the Parliament and other aspects. This is probably something that's going to be probably 18 months to 24 months before it's finalized. There is still some drafting going on, but there are two things that I want to key on regarding this cybersecurity directive. Annex 1 and Annex 1 identifies what they call essential services, and there are 2 essential services that are specifically enumerated that really requires our attention. The first is number 2A, and it talks about air transport. Now, right now, the way this is written, this is primarily about manned aircraft, but they do talk about air traffic management. And given that the Europeans are a little behind the U.S. and where they are with their drone regulations, it would not surprise me if this definition or annex was potentially expanded to include drones. Independent of that specific enumerated provision in Annex 1, there is another paragraph, it's number 8, and it talks about digital infrastructure. And here, digital infrastructure talks about TLD registries, which, if in fact we were to use a TLD for this, would potentially fall within this definition. There are also other provisions. There are other enumerated services under the digital infrastructure bucket in Annex 1 that talks about trust services, cloud providers. So I think when you look at where we are going with the broader drone program, the UTM, I think that the ability for this to fall under either 2A or under 8, I would say probable, possible, highly likely. Again, still in flux, but this is something you definitely want to keep your eye on. Next slide, please. So what I want to do real quickly is I want to touch on a number of articles contained in the current NIS2 directive to call your attention on, because I do believe that they potentially directly intersect with the work that we're doing. So Article 23 was originally inserted by DG Connect as a result of some of the pushback that has resulted as a result of the GDPR and the blocking of underlying WHOIS information in association with certain domain names. So if you go here, they talk about imposing upon the TLD registry operator the ability to collect and maintain accurate information, the ability to make this available upon a lawful and duly justified request from legitimate access providers. So I think as we look at how privacy intersects with potential access to PII associated with certain drone operators, Article 23 is something that you definitely want to potentially keep an eye on as this moves towards final implementation. Next slide, please. Now, Article 18, this is where cybersecurity risk management measures are specifically enumerated. And paragraph 1 basically imposes an obligation on all of those essential services. So remember, I was telling you about Annex 1, number 2, and number 8. If in fact you fall within this requirement, you have to take appropriate and proportional technical measures to manage your cybersecurity risks regarding the security of your networks and the informations therein. So again, I think this is potentially relevant in what we're doing. Paragraph 2 talks about a number of non-exhaustive measures that need to be included. And what caught my attention specifically was 2D of Article 18, where they talk about the supply chain. And I know some of the discussions that we have talked about within this group is this whole idea of a supply chain being able to track things, from the manufacturer line, point of sale to actual registration. So I think the scope of 2D is something that is relevant and also needs to be looked at. Next slide. So why is this important? Why it's important is administrative fines. So as everyone knows through the GDPR, part of the paranoia within businesses and why that garnered so much attention was under the GDPR, there was the potential of a 20 million euro fine or 4% of global turnover. What is interesting is under Article 31, if the paragraph 4 talks about a violation of Article 18, which was that cybersecurity component that I was just referencing, if there is a violation of Article 18 by one of those essential service providers, they are potentially looking at an administrative fine of 10 million euros or up to 2% of total worldwide annual turnover, whichever is higher. So again, if in fact we are going to be, looking at this, I think that this is something that we need to be paying attention. Next slide. And for those that are like, I'm not in Europe, I am a non-European entity, or I'm only selling, or, I'm just going to focus in the US or in Asia Pacific, South America. Much like the GDPR had an extraterritorial provision, the NIS directive has a similar extraterritorial provision. So if the goods and services that you are providing are targeted to the European Union or businesses or individuals, they will in fact exert jurisdiction over you, your company, under this provision. So I think this again is interesting. It's something to closely follow as over the course of the next, say, 12 to 18 months, this is finalized, perhaps in parallel with some of the drone regulations. So I think that is it for my presentation. If I could go to the next slide, I think we're done. Yes, we're done. So.
So overall,
thank you, Michael.
Yeah, overall, it's the registry stuff. It has been in flux for a long time. It's finally coming back to the forefront, and we're actively trying to pursue it. There's a lot of legal stuff going on in Europe that we're now aware of, and we're trying to get rubber onto the road, get it really going now that some other things are starting to clear up. So help, drafting, appreciated, conversation on the list, because we need it. That's it.
Maybe I have one question. So you mentioned the NIS. I'm just wondering if there are any considerations related to the Digital Service Act, or if that's completely independent.
No, there are actually provisions under the. This is the IETF. I was trying to wear more of my engineering hat instead of the lawyer hat, but yes, if you want, there are implications with the DSA as well as the DMA. Under the DSA, there are provisions that talk about safe harbors where the TLD or DNS operators can potentially qualify for if you will, a liability exemption. So if you want, I could perhaps provide that information to the list. But yes, I think where you look at the European Union right now, much like they did with the GDPR in providing thought leadership in the area of data privacy and establishing global standards, I think you see the same thing here, which with the DSA, the DMA, as well as the NIS-2 cybersecurity directive. So I do look at them all as complementary and interconnected.
Okay, thank you. Any other comment? I'm not seeing any comments, so I think we have been through all the presentations. We've addressed all the questions. We have no more questions. Maybe one question we may go back is how we move on the work further. Do we think that interim meetings were useful, and do we want to have those for the next coming months? A basis of one per month might be a nice try. So that's a question I'm raising for the 5 minutes that are left. Yeah, Adam, go ahead.
So interims, one a month would not be a terrible plan. I think when we had the interims going, we were making good progress on a lot of the documents. It kept us all on our toes and kept us pushing forward. And I think with the registry draft, to get it up to speed where everybody else is, I think that would be useful. And instead of 4 of us sitting in a room yelling at each other, maybe having 20 of us in a room virtually yelling at each other, we might get a little bit more. It might be a little bit more annoying, but I think it would be good than keeping it enclosed within, because right now it's been me, Michael, Stu, and Bob back and forth to get where we are now. I think opening it up and getting the we think we have a good architecture. We start iterating over it, expanding it, contracting it, etc.
Okay. Anyone? So you if I try to sum up, you're thinking that having interim meetings is going to be useful.
Yes, I believe once a month would be useful.
Anyone think it's not going to be useful? So I'm hearing none. I don't know, Med, do you want to add something?
Not specific on this on this point about the interims, but yeah, we just a comment is that we recently we stopped to organize the interims because we wanted to I would say to put more focus on the writing of the documents, basically the requirement and the architecture. So now, if we are confident that we are making progress on this one, so yeah, we can go back and yeah and organize these meetings. Yeah.
Okay, so I think we can adjourn the meeting. I'd like to thank.
Just before we adjourn, Daniel, just a reminder that we have the working group last call, which is still running for the architecture document. This is running till the 2023. So please read the draft, and we need more eyes and more reviewers on the document. So to make sure that the document we will send to Eric will be reflecting what we want to have. So please share your comments on the list.
Thank you. Yeah, sure. Okay, so I think we can adjourn the meeting now. And please remain active on the mailing list. Thank you, everyone, for attending that meeting and for moving that work forward. Thank you.
Sharing
Bye-bye.
work. Bye.